Good evening, everyone. It's lovely to see as many people as I can hold on my screen and probably three screens all over. Thank you very much. Uh, I have missed you, many of you that I haven't seen for some time. Welcome, welcome again. We have a wonderful evening with Dr. Etemad tonight. Let's start with prayers from Malaysia, Portuguese prayer, and of course, an English prayer. And then I'll start to introduce our speaker and the subject. I'm welcoming Maria in particular because this is the first time she's joining us, and there might be others who have joined us for the first time, but I just don't know them. But Maria, welcome. Uh, Go ahead, Mr. Liu Chi. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Same Bahasa Malaysia. Is there any removal in the beginning? Let's pray. Ada kalam sukaran kesukaran selain itu katakanlah terpujilah Tuhan. Ya Tuhan, semua hamba-Nya dan semua tunduk pada perintah-Nya. Adakah halau kesukaran selain Tuhan? Katakanlah terpujilah Tuhan. Ya Tuhan, semua hamba-Nya dan semua tunduk pada perintah-Nya.
I will say a prayer in Portuguese. Bem-aventurado é o lugar e a casa e o coração, e bem-aventurada a cidade, a montanha, o refúgio, a caverna e o vale, a terra e o mar, o prado e a ilha, onde se haja feito menção de Deus e celebrado o seu louvor. Aula.
So this is for detachment. O Lord, unto thee I repair for refuge, and toward all thy signs I set my heart. O Lord, whether traveling or at home, and in my occupation or in my work, I place my whole trust in thee. Grant me then thy sufficing help, so as to make me independent of all things, O thou who art unsurpassed in thy mercy. Bestow upon me my portion, O Lord, as thou pleasest, and cause me to be satisfied with whatsoever thou hast ordained for me. Thine is the absolute authority to command. The Baha.
Firuz Khanum, you're on mute. You're muted.
Thank you. Who was that? Thank you very, very much, everyone. And Mr. Liu Chi, thank you for joining us tonight. Although it's early morning for you as well, I wanted to appreciate Regina for being here to say Portuguese prayers almost every week. Thank you. And Sharon, thanks for being here this week. I appreciate it. I wanted to welcome Molly and other friends who have joined us. But there are so many people that I just give you a welcome, one welcome for all. I wanted to introduce one of the nicest and best speakers, I can't say in the world, but I can always say in the world. So whether he likes it or not, I'll say it. Uh, Dr. Kambeze Etemad has been uh, talking for us for a few years, and every single time that it is a fireside with Dr. Etemad, there's a lot of new things that is being opened and reopened before our eyes. And that's why I always bother him to come back. And he very kindly always appreciated and accepts it. Tonight he's going to speak about what's the connection between spirituality and mental health, which is an amazing topic. Thank you, Dr. Atamat. Really appreciate it. And his bio is always one of the shortest bios in the world. So I will read it for you. Dr. Kambeze Banan Etemad is a retired homeschool dad. I don't know why at this age he should be retired, but I won't investigate. Um, an educator, author, amateur musician, and psychiatrist. He founded Talisman Development Services, a training and consulting company that combines ideas from many fields in a fresh approach to maximizing human capacity in life and work. Welcome, Dr. Etamat. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Farajun. Thank you, Khalajun. I am always so delighted to be part of this. It's such a wonderful atmosphere, and I love being part of discussions that are enriching and deeper than the everyday conversation. And if I have to open my big mouth for an hour just to get that discussion going, then I'm happy to do it as often as possible. So let me get my slides ready. Okay, so let's start with the share. And then let me get my slides going. Okay, and then let me adjust this a little bit. Okay, can you see the screen?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. So we'll just jump in. This is about asking the questions that are related to how do spirituality and mental health connect with each other. And really what I want to do is just sort of create a common vocabulary for questions and discussion. It is both subjects, spirituality and mental health, are daunting subjects all by themselves. And when you put them together, they're even more so. So it's more about having a discussion, but I'll throw out some of the things that I figured out for myself along the way. And then we can have hopefully some good discussion. I always give my disclaimers. And so one of the disclaimers I like to give is that I always put more in the slides than are possible to follow. So just focus on the big picture of each slide rather than all the details. You can always go back later in the video and look at the details if you want. The second thing is that this is very much a reflection of my own personal journey, both as a mental health care provider, but also as someone who has pursued the spiritual path. So it is really just, here's what I've learned that works for me, and I'm going to throw it out there, and let's talk about it, rather than, I have no claim on being an expert on either subject. I also want to say that I do have a very integrative approach to this, which is to really borrow ideas that come from a variety of fields. Of course, my own study of the Baha'i writings, my own professional experience as a psychiatrist, but also from other literature, spiritual and philosophical literature, artistic experience, and a variety of other things. And although I'm speaking to an audience that's oriented towards the Baha'i writings, a religious point of view, even a metaphysical approach to life, the reality in my experience is that pursuing spirituality is possible even if you're not a Baha'i, even if you're not religious, and even if you don't believe in a metaphysical side to life. There are practices and behaviors that we can engage in that we've gotten from the spiritual traditions of the world that can cultivate this deeper, better part of ourselves, even if we're not spiritually oriented. And that's often how I approach it professionally with people who can be anywhere from deeply religious to atheist. And so it's very important to remember that. So I may share things that come from the Baha'i writings, but it is not a requirement to be rooted in scripture to pursue a spiritual path. Okay, next. This is just a sound check. Can you hear the music? And can you still hear my voice?
Yes, yes.
Okay. All right. All right. That was just a sound check because I have a couple musical things later. Okay. I want to start by looking at existence, at reality, the universe in general. It exists on multiple levels, or it's in a spectrum. And we're going to take a quick look at each. So the first level is the level of the macro. Big rocks, little rocks, planets, pebbles, even looking at things on the level of, even anatomy, cell biology, those kinds of things. Newtonian mechanics is what applies, all of those things. It's a very obvious side to existence that we can touch, taste, feel, that kind of thing. The next level of existence is more on the atomic level, on the level of chemistry and microbiology, where electromagnetism and subatomic particles, they all operate. And the laws of quantum mechanics, they generally are what are used to understand this level of existence. And then if you go to another level, then there's the level where it's even more basic than the atoms. And this is where there are a lot of contradictions and paradoxes. And physics calls this the fundamental subatomic scale, or quantum chromodynamics. And it's the paradoxes of where waves and particles are the same thing. Energy and matter are interchangeable. Space-time, quantum and relativistic theory are not yet able to reconcile themselves. And then the next level of existence is, the higher order theoretical physics, vibrational approach, the unified theory of everything, and a lot of stuff that frankly I have no idea what it means. And then the next level is to look beyond all of that to the metaphysical level, where things are also multi-layered, and things like mind-matter connectedness are looked at and discussed. So I'm always someone who likes to simplify things. So let's take all that complicated stuff away and just say that there are 5 levels. The basic level it's pretty easy to understand. Pebbles and planets and orbits, and you throw something and it breaks something else. And then there's the chemical, which, is a little bit harder to understand, at least for me. And then there's the level of all those paradoxes that frankly makes me a little crazy. And then there's all of that higher order physics that just is mind-blowing. And then there's sort of the mystical level of things, which can take us to a whole new level of experience and sensation and understanding. So this looks at things kind of like at higher and higher levels, but some people like to look things in terms of going deeper and deeper and deeper. It doesn't matter how you look at it, but these levels of existence are at play. So that's the lens that I want to look at human nature before we talk about spirituality. So there are also levels to us as human beings, and they operate on all of these levels. And I'm not going to do a one-to-one correspondence for this, but I'm going to take some things that come specifically from, actually from a talk I gave in this Oakville Baha'i Fireside. I guess it's been almost 2 years on personal transformation. So you can go back to that video if you want the details, but I'm just going to give sort of like some of the take-home messages from that. So looking at human nature, we all have a physical body. It's an animal, it's a physical machine. And then, according to most spiritual traditions, we also have a soul, a mystical spiritual side. Like I said, we don't necessarily have to buy into a metaphysical approach to things, but the idea of a soul can still have a place, this deeper, higher self to us. In the Baha'i teachings, just to use that for a moment, the soul and the body, the metaphysical and the physical, they interact, they associate with each other for our physical lifetime. And this period, this place of overlap, is the human mind. It is the link. It is created by the association between the physical and the metaphysical. And the mind itself is a mystery that confounds the greatest thinkers even today. So we have the soul, which has its abilities. It's got this ability for mystical perception. It is the wellspring of love, of deep understanding, creativity, nobility, and our sense of justice. The mind, psychology will tell us, has multiple faculties, including consciousness, emotion, intellect, will, and personality. And our body is this machine with instincts and drives and sensory motor powers and an elegant nervous system. And these three layers to us, they interact with each other. This soul, mind, body that makes up each person, we swim in a variety of environments, social environments, physical environments, societal situations, and even the metaphysical universe, if that's what you want to give attention to. But the practical bottom line of all of that is within the mind, in the purple, there are a variety of mentations. Mentations is just a fancy word for thoughts, feelings, intentions, and ideas. All the things that the mind can manifest. And we can get mentations from the soul. We can get mentations from the body. We can get mentations from the mind back to itself. And we can get all kinds of mentations provided to us by our social interactions, by our environments. And the mind has to sort of juggle all of them, sort through them, and make decisions on what to act on. In an ideal life, each part of us has a specific role. The soul is the monarch. It's the lawgiver. It's the one that makes our decisions. The mind, with all of its powers, is the executor of the decisions of the soul. And the body is meant to be the instrument. And so it's important that all three of them are healthy and functioning well in order to live this, what Plato called just, internal justice between the tripartite human being. So But life is not ideal. Many times the body or the mind wants to do more than just its role. It wants to be the boss. It wants to make the decisions. And so there is often a conflict in the mind from all of these inputs on what to do and who we should listen to. And so the dynamics are that the soul gives input in any situation we're in. The soul gives input, the mind has its own opinion. We get input from society, and we have to contend with the conflict that can come from within us. Spirituality is reestablishing the justice, meaning making sure each part of us doesn't step outside of its role. Basically, spirituality means that we really pay the most attention to the impulses of our soul while using the powers of mind and body to carry out those impulses from the soul. And so here is a quote from Baha'u'llah that kind of speaks to that. Obstruct not the luminous spring of thy soul with the thorns and brambles of vain and inordinate affections, and impede not the flow of the living waters that stream from the fountain of thine heart. Now, what does this really mean? Okay, what this means is that we get thoughts and feelings and ideas and intentions from many, many directions. The soul doesn't give us lightning bolts. It doesn't give us visions. It doesn't give us magic. It gives us thoughts and feelings and ideas and intentions. And they're not qualitatively, their characteristics are not any different than the thoughts and feelings and ideas that come from the body, or that come from our conditioning and society, or that come from our ego and our mind. They all are of the same substance, but they carry different messages. So it's not that being spiritual is about, oh, I need to have some kind of super mystical experience that carries me out of my body. Being spiritual is about finding a way to tune in and recognize the thoughts and feelings that are coming from our spiritual nature. And that is the essence of what the spiritual path is about, is to find a way to amplify the volume of our spiritual thoughts and feelings and quiet down the thoughts and feelings that come from the other parts of us. And all of the spiritual traditions tell us we kind of need help from outside of ourselves. If this is the human being right here, soul, mind, and body, every religion offers some type of theology about how to bring energy from outside the system, which is actually a concept from physics. If you really want to change something, you got to bring energy from outside the system. The same idea applies in terms of bringing help from some bigger, deeper side to us or side to the universe. And so if this is now here we're going to talk very briefly about a religious orientation, but there is a non-religious way to look at this that could be part of the discussion if wanted. If this is the human condition where we're dealing with all of these different inputs, spiritual practice brings into the picture this energy from outside of us. Some religions call it the Holy Spirit. Other spiritual philosophies will call it something else. It doesn't really matter what you call it. But human beings are made up of different forms of energy, and there are energies that come from outside of the human system. So it's just another layer of looking at the levels of existence and the energies that are part of it. We'll call it Holy Spirit for the sake of religious discussion, but we can step away from that later if we want. The effect that this type of energy has is to strengthen the intensity of the soul's thoughts and feelings within the mind. It becomes louder, it becomes stronger, and it does have a way of quieting down the input into our minds from other parts of us. So that other talk that was given about a year and a half, 2 years ago goes into more detail about what are the practices that are possible that help this phenomenon happen so that the strength of our spiritual thoughts and feelings are stronger. And we can leave that for that video. But here are the implications here. Spirituality is basically about making the input into our mind from this deeper self, this higher self, making it stronger and stronger. What that means is that if we can find a way to have more spiritual thoughts, spiritual feelings, spiritual doesn't mean just being abstract, oh, I want to sit in a cave and meditate. Spiritual means creative. Spiritual means noble. Spiritual means just. Spiritual means loving. It's not some abstract thing. It's a certain category of our thoughts and feelings that are noble, creative. They're tuned into beauty. They're tuned into connectedness and creativity. So we can call that the thoughts and feelings from our soul, or you can call it all kinds of other things, which various philosophies have called it that. You can call it from our inner gold. And so the metaphor of alchemy is a very common metaphor for bringing out this deeper gold from within us, or tapping into our inner talisman, or bringing out our best humanity. There are a million ways to describe the idea of how do I pay attention to the thoughts and feelings that are coming from my best self, from my deepest self, from my golden self, from my soul, whatever you want to call it. Now, whether that soul is a metaphysical entity or it's just a special cascade in the brain of chemical reactions, or it's a special corner of the mind, it sort of doesn't really matter, because there are practices that will make those thoughts stronger in our life if we practice those practices. And most of those practices don't necessarily require a buy-in to a religious belief system, or even necessarily always a metaphysical belief system. But that's one way to look at it. So, spirituality is about living an honest life that we are soul, mind, and body. We have all of these thoughts and feelings coming from all different parts of ourselves and from outside of ourselves. We need to accept them and own them, but we need to try to specifically cultivate the thoughts and feelings that come specifically from our soul, our best self. And even when we do that, that doesn't necessarily mean that they always interact with each other. Like, just because we say a prayer doesn't mean we're suddenly going to magically heal a mental illness or a physical illness. That's not how spirituality works. That's actually more of a superstition than it is about the interaction between these levels of existence. At the same time, there are fields like psychoneuroimmunology and psychoneuroendocrinology where look at what's the connection chemically between what we think and how our nervous system operates, and then how our hormones and our immune system works. So the mind-body connection is being looked at from a chemical point of view. And spirituality can definitely affect how we think. But spirituality doesn't necessarily have a direct effect on our biochemistry. Like, that is not something we should start to confound. Because in the world of physics, there's always a force that acts on an object. If you hit something, it will cause it to go at a certain speed in a certain direction. The same thing goes with metaphysical forces affecting metaphysical objects. Metaphysical objects don't act on physical objects. They act on metaphysical objects like the human soul. if you are metaphysically oriented. So physical forces will act on physical objects, on phenomenon, impacting their action and their energy. And the same thing happens with metaphysical forces acting on metaphysical objects. And because human nature is part metaphysical, then spirituality will affect the metaphysical part of us, which then, if we use our minds to convert what is happening in our souls into something psychological and behavioral, then it becomes our bodies and our behavior. That's the way things get translated, not by, let me summon the spiritual world psychologically, bring the medical physical forces, and then I can lift that car and I can lift that rock like in Star Wars. That's not how it works. So we need to be careful about not going into magical thinking about this. Okay, so that brings us to looking at mental health. So up until now, we've talked about spirituality is about having the soul having more of a say in what the mind decides to do. Mental health is about making sure the different powers of the mind are functioning, that our thinking is working well, our feelings are under a certain amount of stability, our motivation, our personality, and our consciousness are functional, and that they're integrated with each other. And mental illness can be defined as the non-functionality of one or more of the powers of the mind, or even if they're all working fine, they're not coordinated with each other. Because there are certain mental illnesses where intellect and behavior, or emotion and behavior, are so disconnected that there is a lot of fallout from a lack of coordination. So mental health is about functionality and coherence, specifically in the level of the mind. Now, because the mind is, at least according to this model I'm giving you, because the mind is in fact partly created by the overlap of a spiritual and a physical side, it means that the spiritual side of us can affect our mental health, and so can the physical side of us, but also the inherent functionality of the mind can be an aspect of mental health or mental illness. Some people's mental health is a direct product of the way their nervous system is or isn't working. For other people, it might be a matter of cognitive or thinking patterns that they learned when they were children. And for other people, there may be aspects of spiritual self-neglect, or actually spiritual misuse by us that can affect mental health. And we'll talk about that shortly. But even if you look at the body, there are levels of existence even in the body. So for example, modern medicine is mostly only operating on the first two levels of existence. If you've got a broken hip or a broken bone or something like that, that's macro. That's Newtonian mechanics. You need a carpenter to basically fix your broken pieces. Much of medicine is the biochemistry, which is the second level. But there are approaches to healing that actually operate on the other levels, like on the paradoxic level. I mean, I won't even speak to the unifying or the metaphysical. But for example, biofield energetic work. Acupuncture is not just about putting pins in nerve clusters. There's an energetic component to acupuncture. Homeopathy is not just about dilution after dilution of a compound. It's about energetics in that interface between matter and energy. And there are things that homeopathy can do that biochemistry can't. And these are just a few examples of the fact that even if you're just looking at the body, there are levels to healthcare that need to be looked at to have a total multi-level approach to just physical, let alone mental. Forget about the ability right now of, most of, forms of healing to look at metaphysical. All right, so I'm going to actually save this because I'm sure this is going to become a question. So we'll save it. No, I'll read it now. This was a question to Baha'u'llah about health and the mind and the body and the soul. Thou hast asked me whether man will retain after his physical death the self-same individuality, personality, consciousness, and understanding that characterize his life in this world. If this should be the case, how is it that thou hast observed that whereas such slight injuries to his mental faculties as fainting and severe illness deprive him of his understanding and consciousness, his death, which must involve the decomposition of his body and the dissolution of its elements, is powerless to destroy that understanding and distinguish that consciousness? He's saying if something slight like an illness can cause the loss of mental faculty, how could death not also cause the loss of certain faculties of the mind? How can anyone imagine that man's consciousness and personality will be maintained when the very instruments necessary to their existence and function will have completely disintegrated? Know thou that the soul of man is exalted above and is independent of all infirmities of body or mind, saying that even when the body and or the mind are unhealthy, the soul is untouched by that. That a sick person showeth signs of weakness is due to the hindrances that interpose themselves between his soul and his body, for the soul itself remaineth unaffected by any bodily ailments. So I'll just leave that out there for digestion and for discussion. But I want to talk about, let's look at mental illness now in terms of, let's say somebody is depressed, okay? From a total human being point of view, there are a lot of things we'd have to ask. Why is this person depressed? And like the reason why one person is depressed is not going to be the same reason why somebody else is depressed. Because if a person is made up of soul, mind, and body, all of which are influencing the mind, as is the environment, one person's depression may be caused by something mental, whereas someone else it might be something biochemical. For someone else it might be situational, someone else it might be spiritual, and someone else it might be some combination of two or three or all of these. And then even within that, there's multiple layers. Like even if you just want to look at the physical causes, it's not just, oh, let me look at their serotonin and their dopamine and let me give them an antidepressant. It may be that, there's a lot of crap we have in our food that more and more research is showing has a direct effect on things like mental health. But systemic inflammation causes depression. They now know that. And there's a lot of things that we eat that cause systemic inflammation. And not to mention, there's more data that electromagnetic radiation, cell phone signals, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, 5G, all of those things, they're shown to exacerbate bodily inflammation. So even if we just say, oh, maybe this is just a physical cause for this person's depression, there may be different causes to the physical cause. And it's not always that they necessarily need, an antidepressant. So we got to look at the underlying processes and recognize there's what's called a differential diagnosis. There are multiple possible causes. And for each person, you can't just assume it's one thing or another. because what the cause is will determine what the solutions are. Okay, so what is the effect of mental health on spirituality? Well, if your mind is working well, if your awareness, your thoughts, your feelings, your motivation are all operating on a baseline level of functionality and they're coordinated with each other, it facilitates our ability to pursue the spiritual path. It doesn't, just because we're mentally healthy or stable, doesn't mean we're spiritually fulfilled. And this is often something I deal with as a psychiatrist, that somebody comes in, they're feeling depressed, and they get on a medication and they really need it and they benefit from it, but they're still feeling like their life isn't fulfilled. There's a level of not happy that is not their biological depression. It's their existential self-care. It's about, are you taking care of your own self, your existential life? Whether that's spiritual or creative or interpersonal or whatever, are you tapping into what your deeper self wants and suggests, and are you acting on it? So mental health is necessary to effectively or 100% pursue the spiritual path. But a lot of people continue to pursue the spiritual path even when their mental functioning is not where they want it to be. And even if you get your mental health care taken care of, doesn't mean you are automatically on the spiritual fulfillment path. But the bottom line is that mental health's effect on spirituality is to facilitate, to allow for us to pursue and carry out our spiritual efforts. But we still have to make the spiritual efforts. Another phenomenon that I've noticed as a psychiatrist is that sometimes mental health symptoms show themselves as if they're spiritual or religious phenomenon, when in fact they really are not. So somebody might have a delusion or a hallucination that they are convinced is God or Jesus or the Holy Spirit. And okay, every prophet was in fact called a lunatic. So what are the criteria to distinguish between someone who's psychotic or manic versus someone who's truly a prophet? That's a theological question, and there are systematic ways to answer that question. But sometimes a sick person will manifest with religious symptomology, and that's because they are already, that's part of their mental world, is their religious thinking, and it just gets caught in the crossfire of their symptoms. Another thing that's very interesting is that, for example, I've read the stories of different figures throughout history who have received a revelatory experience, Baha'u'llah, Muhammad, and others. It sort of sounds a lot like what someone might feel when they're having a seizure. And in some ways, having a seizure and having revelation look the same on the outside. And so again, the question becomes, how do you differentiate between the two? There are criteria for both, and just because they might look superficially similar doesn't mean they're the same thing. Okay, what is the positive impact of spirituality on mental health? Very, very basic. Our mental health is partly dependent on, it's dependent on healthy body. It's dependent on dealing with boundaries with our social worlds and the environment. It's dependent on managing all of the thoughts and feelings and intentions and motivations in our mind. That's a big part of it, is managing all the mentations wherever they're coming from. Spirituality, what that does is that it increases the ratio of spiritual thoughts and feelings that are in the mix in here, in the mind. The more spiritual thoughts and feelings we have in the mix, the easier it is to pursue and follow those spiritual thoughts and act on them. And so people who self-care their existential self, their existential side of life, there is generally a greater degree of resilience. There's generally a greater degree of creativity. There seems to be a certain amount of immunity against despair, although not completely. I mean, of course, there are limitations to the impact of spirituality. If you're suffering from a major mental illness that has a biological basis, no matter how much you pray, you still got to do something about the biology. So it's not the same for every person, but the positive impact of spirituality on mental health is that it can increase the proportion of spiritual thoughts and feelings that the mind is managing from day to day. And it's not an instantaneous thing. It's not like, let me say a prayer and lightning bolt, suddenly I've got a million more spiritual thoughts. Spirituality is something that's cultivated over time through discipline that generally and gradually increases that proportion. Okay. So what are some of the potential negative effects of religion and spirituality on mental health? There are two things in my observation and experience, both as a psychiatrist who has treated a lot of people who are spiritual and or religious, as well as a religious person myself. And that is that there's religious distortion and there's something called spiritual bypassing. And we're going to talk about both. And I'm drawing from a lot of thoughts that I've actually written out in 3 essays and in 1 talk. So I'm not just pulling this out of my ear. So let's talk about religious distortion. Religious distortion is not about distorting this energetic flow from a metaphysical universe into the mind. It's about distorting the way we understand religion, which affects our mind and therefore affects our ability to process our spirituality. So I'm not talking about some type of corruption of the spirit. I'm talking about screwing with the mind through religious abuse. So let's look at what those are. Religious distortion is usually the result of some form of dogmatism or religious fanaticism or extremity that is either imposed upon someone or is associated with abuse of vulnerability that can cause what's called cognitive distortion, which is basically you have screwed up ideas based on a misinterpretation of religious ideas. You could create intense inner conflicts that bring up a lot of defense mechanisms that cause classic Freudian neurosis. It can cause personality pathology or trauma or other things. So religious distortion is one of the major causes of psychological mental illness in the world, hands down. Here are some examples. So religious distortion can happen in the family context, either with or without family dysfunction, or just religious distortion as part of educating children. It can happen within a faith community's culture and practice, or it can happen on the level of society. So here's one example of religious distortion that I've encountered among religious people I've advised. A lot of people believe that if today I see the light, tomorrow I have to be the light. Like the rate of spiritualizing ourselves has to be instantaneous. And so oftentimes people take on an incredibly unrealistic expectation of themselves in terms of growing spiritually. And that can create a lot of pressure and despair. And it can actually work against spiritual progress. Some of the things that I've noticed with Baha'is that I've worked with is basic distortions of certain Baha'i teachings, frankly. One of them is that this dichotomy that people feel sometimes based on a limited understanding of the Baha'i teachings, that, we can't be negative about things. We have to always be positive. And that, reality, it doesn't have a place because it's being negative. And so people think that something like fault finding or backbiting, which is condemned in the Baha'i teachings, they think it's the same thing as looking at problems and trying to solve them and doing healthy critique of behavior that creates problems. They are not the same thing. But because a lot of Baha'is think they're the same thing and they don't want to be bad, they never bother to look at problems or solve them. They're never willing to call out when there's behavior that's causing problems, whether it's interpersonally, in a family, or even in the Baha'i communities. And it can cause mental illness. It can cause depression, anger, frustration, anxiety, panic, a lot of things. That's one. Another one is, I've noticed that, we'll skip that one. Another one is suffering. There is in my observation, there's a significant percentage of Baha'is that I've worked with or interacted with who thinks that every bad thing that happens in life comes from God. And that's just not accurate to the Baha'i teachings. So I'm going to give you this is the differential diagnosis of suffering. Because depending on the cause of one's suffering, there's a different response. And this is basically, I've harvested different reasons why there might be hardships in life coming from the Baha'i writings. Certainly, sometimes it is divine intervention. There are definitely places in the Baha'i writings where suffering or hardship is something visited upon us by God for some reason. But there are other times where suffering is the automatic consequence of violating some physical, psychological, social, or spiritual principle. You screwed up, you got a consequence. God is not having an active part in that. You jump out a window, you're going to fall and break your neck. That's not God, visiting on you. The same thing happens with social and spiritual situations. Sometimes suffering is a natural sign of injury and loss, and it's not a bad thing. It just is. You break your bone and you hurt. That's not hurt. That, you lose someone and you're in pain. It's not that God brought it on us. Victim of someone else's actions. The primary hunger of life can be painful sometimes. The consequences of our actions, something that Baha'u'llah calls the changes and chances of the world. Sometimes the randomness of life just makes life suck. Straight up. It's not that God is throwing that at us. And so we need to become a little bit more clear, because when you look at the Baha'i writings, in the different types of causes, there are different types of responses. But if we say everything is from God, maybe we're taking certain things on the chin when we should actually be mustering ourselves and doing something about it rather than waiting for God to redeem us or to show us the way. Just a thought. The point is that misunderstanding through a distorted religious lens, our suffering, can bring mental illness on if we are fanatical about it. Okay, that brings us to spiritual bypassing, which is actually a concept that was introduced to me by a dear friend of mine who is also a psychiatrist. He's a former Catholic, now Buddhist, and we have the greatest conversations. And he was telling me, you need to look up this concept. It's very in line with the stuff we're talking about. So here's a definition I cobbled together based on stuff I read on the internet. Spiritual bypassing is using spiritual or religious ideas, actions, or explanations to oversimplify, avoid, dismiss, or sidestep real, uncomfortable, difficult, unresolved, complicated, or problematic psychological issues. It's when we use a distortion of religion to avoid something we have to do psychologically. So let me give a few examples that I've seen, and I've seen a lot of this even among Baha'is that I've worked with. So one of them is the everything will be okay attitude. You know, sometimes people will say, well, my religion says everything's going to be okay. And for example, Baha'is themselves will say, well, you know, our destiny is so-and-so, so it's going to get better. It's going to get better. And the problem is that is used unconsciously to feed complacency. The attitude of everything's going to be okay is meant to muster us to do work, to make change. Because actually, even the promises of everything will be okay are conditional in the scripture. Like, even if you just take the Baha'i literature. But I know this applies in other religions because I've had conversations with Jews, Christians, Muslims, and Buddhists. But let's just take the Baha'i scripture. When, oh, it's our destiny to have this kind of progress. But the Baha'i writings also say that we can forfeit our destiny if we don't meet the conditions of it. If we don't do the work, if we don't play our part, we can forfeit the everything will be okay promise. And there are plenty of examples of that in Baha'i history where promises were not fulfilled because the promisee didn't play their part. So that's one. Another one is this whole idea that we should ignore the hard stuff. We should ignore the darkness. We should just affirm that all is good and we don't need to look at the bad. And so a fundamental part of spiritual growth is that we need to look at the darkness within ourselves and come to terms with it. That's a very important part of spirituality. There needs to be the ability to critique the behavior of, let's say, for example, our faith community. Otherwise, the faith community doesn't grow. And then we need to be able to critique the behavior and character of people whose actions are causing toxic effects in our lives. And this is all found in the Baha'i scripture. But because a lot of people operate with a superficial understanding of, oh, we should only see the good and not the bad. But there's a way to do that that is not the same thing as pretending there is no bad. And this is another one which we'll just skip because I don't want to go for too long. Okay, so here are the last few things with spiritual bypassing. Sometimes we disempower ourselves by pretending or suppressing things that we feel. For example, grief. I've been to a number of funerals. And I'm not picking on the Baha'is. I'm just giving it because it's my own experience. I've been to a number of funerals where the family of the person who died is in grief. And another non-grieving individual, because they weren't that close to the person who died, they basically say, why are you so sad? You should be happy. And first of all, psychologically, that's destructive. Secondly, my own answer to a Baha'i who would say that is, would you tell Baha'u'llah that when his son died and he grieved for months? Would you tell the Prophet himself, who is fully tuned into that spiritual realm? Would you actually tell him that? No, because he knows that already, that there's a good place beyond, but he's grieving. So giving ourselves the permission to grieve rather than cover it all up, that's a healthy thing to do. Another one is anger. Again, in my experience, many Baha'is operate with the idea that all forms of anger are bad because some forms of anger are bad. But some forms of anger are just indignation coming from the soul because some truth or justice is being violated. And that indignation is a legitimate, righteous anger that deserves to be honored. But there is sort of a thinking out there that sometimes we should never be angry. We should never express anger. Like, that's not enlightened. And that's actually mentally destructive to suppress righteous anger. Another example is a lot of Baha'is operate with an idea that self is bad, that self-care, self-concern, attending to our needs and ourself is wrong and bad. And the reality is that the Baha'i writings speak about the self that gets in between us and God and the self that is pleasing to God. So there are two selves, and some aspects of self are divine and deserve to be treated that way. But we operate in a culture that often suppresses any type of self-affirmation. And again, is very much can be a cause of a lot of neurosis and mental illness. The last thing I want to talk about is the idea of giving to God what God doesn't want to be given. We like to say, it's all God's will. And we rationalize everything as God's will and attribute things and ask God for things that it is not God's to give, and blame God for things that was never his responsibility, because there are layers of engagement on the different levels of existence. And so what we do by doing this, by misattributing things as God's responsibility and giving credit and blame to God that is undeserved, we take away our own agency to change things in our life. And that is where something like this misattribution to God can seriously affect mental health. And the primary way that often shows itself is the things that religious people pray for. So, as an illustration to that last idea, I want to share a song that I grew up with by the Doobie Brothers. They are still around. It's called How Do the Fools Survive? And it's a song that is sung from the perspective of God, talking about humanity always blaming him for stuff that is their responsibility. So here we go. Okay, just a little funk for the mood. We'll skip this slide. This is more just sort of an overview, a review. Now, after I've said all of this, the truth is, do any of us really know what the answers to these questions are? No. That's why we're talking, and hopefully we can have an animated discussion next. But does anybody really know? Not really. So This is how we're ending it. For anybody who recognizes the song. Okay, so thank you for indulging me with my audio visual stuff. And now we're open for comments, questions, reflections, alternative points of view.
What a fantastic talk this was. First of all, Montgomery family, I wanted to welcome you. Thank you for participating tonight. Also, Peter Baldwin from England. I know it's very early for you. Thank you so much. And Ms. Rizwan Ahmadiyeh, welcome you all. Friends, we're going to go to probably United States. Montgomery family, please go ahead. You need to unmute yourself.
So
Hello, how are
we're
you?
all here, but there's only room for one person on the camera, so
No
I
problem.
can show.
Sure.
They're not wanting to be on camera.
Hi,
So
Elaine.
just hi, Combies. Hi, Combies. Hello, thank you so much. Just wanted to say this was wonderful. There were like 3 questions that I wrote down really fast, and that I just wanted, in particular, we were all very much engaged with when we were speaking about the spiritual bypassing and just this idea of not speaking, not being able to speak about the reality or speak about negative things and the impact that has on our mental health and just our mental and our spiritual growth, I think, is something that we've all spoken a lot about as a family. And one of the things that we have come to, to realize is that how powerful it is for us to be able to hear the stories of transformation. And that many times we don't want to speak about the stories of transformation because they're very painful and there's a lot of messiness. And as you had spoken about, one of the first concept you came up with was this, or where you spoke about was this idea of, a person, one day they become a Baha'i and the next day they're supposed to have, transformed,
Yeah.
And so just the idea of being able to have conversations with our young ones, because we do have a young one here, and how important that is to have those conversations with our young ones so that, a part of taking care of ourselves and our spiritual daily life is about being able to navigate those emotions and navigate understanding these feelings and emotions and all the, diversity of thought that comes from transformation in that process, and how much we can really learn from one another when we share those stories and we go there, especially when we talk about elders or we talk about people who are older. They've been through a lot of struggles in their lives and how much we could learn from those struggles. And one of the things that really impacted me as a young person was that when the House of Justice asked many of the Knights of Baha'u'llah to tell their stories, and I read many of them, and many of them were very painful stories. I loved them. There were some really beautiful books, and I learned a lot from them, because it wasn't just, oh, gee, we became Baha'is and our life transformed and everything was wonderful after that. As a matter of fact, it was actually quite different. It was quite the opposite. Many of them suffered greatly. And I think this is not to say that, having a religious life means that you're supposed to suffer, but I think it's about finding that balance between suffering and joy, the joy and the pain. That's what I really love. We live in the South. Amongst the African American community, that's a big part of the spiritual life, is that joy comes with pain. And those two things alternate together, just like sunshine and rain. And that you don't have one, you don't have the other. And that those things, and Shoghi Effendi talks about this also with crisis and victory, the idea of crisis and victory. And when we are able to share our crises as well as our victories, we all learn and grow from that. And it also helps us to be mirrors and balance ourselves in the chaos of the world, if you will, so that we don't feel like, oh, wow, we're alone and there's this strange thing happening to us that maybe is not happening to anyone else in the world, right?
Yeah.
So just wanted to ask that question about that, and how can we bring forth these conversations about transformation and the joy and the pain, and integrate those into our daily lives. And being able to share stories of the emotions, the negative emotions that come up, and not just only the positive. And how can we become more comfortable with that?
In everyday life, outside of the context of like in a formal conversation or session, I think for me, it starts with pursuing existential growth. And I'm using the term existential growth as a synonym for spiritual path, because a lot of people who are trying to fulfill themselves, they need to see it in a more generic way rather than exclusively spiritual. And that's a perfectly legitimate thing, because it all comes from the same self, deep, higher self. But pursuing existential growth is about movement in life. Being this kind of person today, being one step forward tomorrow. Not warp drive, not hyperdrive, not a wormhole, but a little step. But that movement is still movement. And unless you're in the dark, cold vacuum of space, movement in any other environment, by definition, includes friction. Therefore, by definition, life and progress are accompanied by hardship. And anyone who says that's not true is either good at hiding it or they're lying to themselves. But it's just the nature of things. And it's not a bad thing. What's bad is trying to pretend it's not there. That is unhealthy. So it has to be about embracing it in ourselves. And then I think for me, I don't know if this really answered your question, but it triggered to me, at some point, I just really stopped giving one-dimensional conversation or answers. Like, even if a perfect stranger is like, hey, how you doing? Because we're passing through the sliding doors at the grocery store. I won't just say, doing great. I'll be like, shitty day, but I had some good spots too. Or whatever it might mean, or in the checkout line, or if it's in a conversation with someone, just being the mixture that life is, in small doses. Because sometimes it's a question of dose that is not digestible. But I think most people appreciate when we're honest that we don't live this glamorized life that they see only our outside while their inside suffers. Like equalizing things that way is always an affirmation of humanity. So for me, I've accidentally or unintentionally started more conversations that way that were meaningful just by being real in 5 seconds only. Like that. So, and I think that everything builds from that. Like, when our daughter was young, we, at some point, Melanie and I just decided as our parenting, now it wasn't even conscious. We just were honest about owning our own, like, not doing such a great job right now. And then later on, when she was a early teenager and she started to call us out on stuff, like, the only thing to do was like, Elle, we effed up. we dropped the ball on that one. Like just owning it and making it part of the conversation, but also more, not so much in looking in the past, but in the present, like, oops, I guess I was wrong about that. Saying something like that is so incredibly meaningful for so many people. And I deliberately do that when as a physician, when I'm working in a treatment team, I try to openly admit when I was incorrect about something, because in the United States, everybody expects the doctors to behave with pompous infallibility. So by just owning, like, oh, you just gave me information that correct my understanding of things. That's not any different than admitting in the kitchen while you're making dinner, admitting to your little kid, oh, I just made a mistake. Let's correct that. Or, I'm having a really tough day. Or like there's that Dr. Seuss book, why is dad sad and mad? Like, why can't dad be glad? Like dad had a sad day. And like Elise would ask when she was a kid, Dad, do you ever have sad days? I'm like, Elle, I got sad days a lot. I get sad in the days a lot. Yeah, of course. So I think it's just about being real in small doses in the situations we're in. We don't need to turn it into a campaign of realness. I think that's where it starts for me.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Dr. Etemad, may I ask Joan and Peter and Chahla June to wait, because somebody has put something on the chat for me, and with your permission, I will read that for you,
Sure.
Dr. Etemad. Question: why do I always feel depressed and sad when I pray to God?
I can only give you possible factors that might be at play, but only you know which of these factors are at play for you, because it's different for everyone. But let's start with what prayer means for a lot of people. Prayer is sometimes the only time of the day where we consciously let ourselves feel what we want things to be in contrast to what things are now. So simply acknowledging that where we are now is not where we want to be. And it might be because things are hard, or whatever it might be. It's owning that can be sad. I think and that sadness is not a bad thing. It's not even it's not even a psychiatric thing. It's an existential sorrow of the yearning. That's the second thing. Prayer is the expression of yearning. We are built, according to Baha'u'llah, we are created to know God, but God is unknowable. So we are set up to reach towards something we can never reach. Well, that's freaking sad on some level. And Baha'u'llah even talks about it. Thou hearest my groaning and my wailing and the lamentation of my heart. Baha'u'llah owns the sorrow. That is not the sorrow of life is tough because this person, persecutes me, or that person is doing that, but because of my remoteness from where I want to be. So on a fundamental existential level, that sorrow is a joy. We can reframe it. And that is not something to shy away from. We have to actually wrap ourselves around that and let that existential sorrow, because it's two sides. It's the yearning for something that is so magnificent that I naturally yearn for it, even though I don't understand it. Because the yearning is a reflection of how awesome you are. Like, boo-hoo is the other side of wow. Like it's the same thing. But then prayer is an emotionally vulnerable time for people. It's the time where they open up their heart. And so it's a praise, It's a gratitude, but it's also a supplication and a begging. So there's a positive and there's a sorrow. So prayer is going to be sorrowful. Now, that doesn't mean everybody's going to cry and weep every time they say prayers, because everybody is going to have a different affective and behavioral response to whatever they're thinking and feeling. So I also don't want to create the expectation that we should be crying every time we pray. I'm just saying that it wouldn't be surprising. Now then, there are specific reasons why we pray. One category of praying, of why we pray, is for relief from specific hardships. And those hardships, of course, many of them are saddening. And it's a confession of powerlessness, which is also depressing sometimes, because we have been conditioned to think that we can do everything. And when we hit a roadblock where we can't do anything about such and such a thing, it's saddening. And the unburdening of that sorrow to God, to the universe, to our soul, to whatever it is that we orient ourselves to, that is actually a cleansing experience if we do it unabashed, without any shame or hesitation. So I don't know if that answers your question. And I didn't even bother to answer it like, okay, well, we might be struggling with depression, or there may be circumstances that are making us sad, because of course, all of those factors can be at play too, from one situation to another.
Thank you so much, friends. If you would like to address me, I can address Dr. Etemad and I can ask your questions. Here, I wanted to welcome my very, very dear friend, Queen Bridget. Thanks for joining us tonight. Please, if you want, come and share your views. She comes from a very deep Christian background, and we would really benefit from her ideas. Anyways,
Please.
you're more than welcome, Bridget, to join us. Thank you for coming tonight. Joan, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I'm joining from Calgary. My name is Joan Young, and I have something I would just like Dr. Etemad to comment on, to clarify. And my experience in the Baha'i community includes a lot of interactions with people from the First Nations, the Blackfoot Nations in my area. And someone said to me the other day, in the context of discussing the trauma that resulted from the residential schools era and experience, someone said to me, well, how can the Baha'i faith heal intergenerational trauma? And my first response was, well, to teach someone the Baha'i faith can't heal that. Can you comment about the confusion that is implied in that question that I was asked? Like, there's a confusion of levels of the nature of things, isn't there?
Yes. The intellectual understanding of anything, no matter how beautiful, noble, sublime that it is not healing. It's just a resource. The feeling, a feeling that might come with that intellectual understanding, a feeling of joy, of hope, of peace, is not healing. It might be fuel for the healing. So teaching someone the Baha'i faith, or any philosophy or belief system that somebody finds empowering and validating, is not automatically going to cause healing. Um, it's the application of the most basic ideas that, okay, yeah, those ideas are found in the Baha'i teachings, but they're also found elsewhere. They're not, the Baha'i faith doesn't have a corner on that market on what is going to cause intergenerational healing. Intergenerational healing is really, from my limited understanding, intergenerational healing is a complicated version of single generational healing, of one person's healing based on all the crap they inherited and the crap they don't want to pass on. So what does that involve? It involves taking an honest look at what your own growing up was and understanding how it shaped how you think and how you feel and how you behave, but then realizing that you don't have to be those reflexes anymore, and you can create new reflexes of how you think and behave and over time feel, and that you can practice those new reflexes with people and have a different type of interpersonal and family and group experience. And by affirming the merit of all that we have inside of us, that all that crap got in the way of, because by practicing things the healthy way for ourselves, we get to bring out ourselves, our true selves. And other people can bring out their true selves, and there's a different kind of interaction. And once you taste of what that is like, healing happens because it becomes more than just intellectual or emotional. It becomes part of our being. So what does that look like intergenerationally? It means that kind of reflection and examination of what came to us and what came through the generations. It helps us partially forgive generations before us, but not necessarily. We can forgive, but also say, that shouldn't have happened to me, even though I recognize that it shouldn't have happened to you either. So forgiving doesn't mean forgetting. We can say, okay, I got it, but I still need to heal, and that I can't let that happen to me anymore. I think it just means like that kind of conversation has to happen across generations, tribes, and groups. And I think that, those conversations, and the conversation can't just be a bitch session. It has to be about, well, how does all of this affect the way I do things, the way I think and do things, and how do I want to change that going forward? So that conversation just can't be talking for talking's sake, but knowing that that is the kind of conversation to have. I think that that kind of conversation has to happen among people of different generations, with each other, and among people of different life and racial and ethnic and national and gender experiences. So what does that all boil down to in my understanding of which Baha'i teaching applies the most to this? One of the Baha'i teachings that I find to be the most important is a spiritual and moral obligation to make friends with people who are different from us and have genuine friendship with people who are different from us. And genuine friendship entails, I know you, you know me, and we also go have a pizza or watch a movie. It's fun and serious. Like Khalil Gibran says, let there be no purpose in friendship save the deepening of the spirit. So friendship is about depth as well as recreation. And part of that, by knowing you, is to know your story, to know your tribe's story, to know your tribe's pain, to know your pain. But you need to feel safe enough that you can share that with me. So I need to be safe enough for you. So the kind of person we need to be, and the way the oneness of humanity, sort of like the flagship Baha'i principle, the oneness of humanity translates itself most immediately in friending people. Like, I want to be your friend because you're different on those secondary levels. I want to see through the lens of your diversity so that our unity can get in touch with each other. Your soul, my soul, which is of the same substance, can connect, but by appreciating and understanding. Like, you're a woman, I'm a man. You're young, I'm old. You're from this part of the world, I'm from that part of the world. And by appreciating and empowering, there's a lot of healing that comes from just being seen by someone who genuinely admires us. And we could cite lofty quotes and all of that, but that's really what it boils down to, is how good are we at seeking out people, new engagements, new interactions, and like embracing and sometimes going after diversity, not because it's time for me to make friends with that token, this person, or that token, that person, but like, life is a deprivation if I lack diversity in my world. And like, that's the world's necessity. Like, that is a spiritual like path. It's not just sort of like to check it off the box, which is what a lot of things became for a while. So now, is that exclusively a Baha'i thing? Of course not. But if somebody takes to heart the packaging that the Baha'i revelation offers of the oneness of humanity and diversity and this and that, but then translates it into the teachings or the principles or the ideas of really friending and social pioneering and that kind of thing, then being a Baha'i will facilitate that, but in one little corner of the world. We need millions of little corners doing that, and they don't have to be Baha'is. Like, anybody can do that if they're animated by those principles of all humanity is one, there's a unity as well as diversity, and I want to translate all of that into friending you. I guess. I mean, I don't know. But I do think that there is a lot of mental health tied. I mean, I've worked as a therapist, I've worked as a psychiatrist, and I am very much convinced that there is a significant percentage of people who the only reason they go to a therapist is because they don't have enough deep, true friendships. They might have pals and buddies, but everybody needs a handful of people that are going to call them out on their BS and admire them for the things nobody else sees and have fun in the process.
What a beautiful response. What a wonderful response. Thank you so much, Dr. Etemad. Joan,
Great
it was
question.
a fantastic question.
Very
Thank
important.
you so much. Thank you. Peter, I'm glad you're not sleeping tonight. It must be 1 or 2 in the morning. Peter, welcome, welcome, welcome. Go ahead.
I often sleep during the day. I'm
Nice
a
to
bat,
see you again.
a bat of the
That's
night.
fine. That's fine.
This might sound like a broken record, but that's just me. Read the House, calling on us to read our social reality.
Yes.
And going down the rabbit hole and beginning to discover that the social reality of the world is very different to what we were educated to believe.
Yes.
Such as discovering that megavitamin therapy, which had been discovered over 70 years ago by Dr. Abram Hoffer in Saskatchewan in 1951, and is still suppressed almost completely by big bad pharma, and discovering that at the age of 52, where David Icke discovered, quote, the world is run by psychopaths, and announced it on live television in 1991. And Terry Wogan, educated in Ireland, not England, What, you only discovered that at the age of 38? Could you say something about the issues related to going down the rabbit hole, and our understanding about social reality becomes wildly different from almost everyone around us? And the apparent ban in the community of bringing up anything that could be seen as vaguely controversial or political. Thanks.
The ban in the Baha'i community?
Yeah. Well,
Yes.
English Baha'i community anyway.
Yes. No, it's in the American Baha'i community too. So, yes, there is a taboo. There is an avoidance or suppression, depending on where one is, of talking about things that are potentially polarizing or that have been co-opted by the political debate in the larger world. And I think it comes from two basic things that I've observed now. I'm pushing 60. I've been a conscientious participant in the life of the Baha'i community since I was a middle teenager. So I've seen it across a number of iterations of Baha'i culture and the changes in surrounding culture. And I see two things. One, this goes back to the idea of religious distortion. There is a fundamental misunderstanding of what the Baha'i teachings are on avoiding politics. And there are specific things that the Baha'i teachings warn Baha'is not to engage in certain types of activity and debate that follow a particular template, polarization, partisan, that. But it is not a prohibition against talking about any issue that is a legitimate issue. The problem is that, again, a lot of times when people want to talk about those issues, they slip into talking about policy rather than the issue and the principles behind it. And that leads to the second thing, which is we don't know how to talk about things. In general, we have not yet learned how to apply, like if friendship is one of those most potent things in my experience for the gradual changing of the culture of our little worlds that we each live in. I think the other one is how to consult and how to discourse. And the Baha'i writings give a template on how to do that. But we all, for the most part, still seem to conduct discussion and decision-making according to other models of discussion and decision-making. If you're a doctor, then you conduct consultation according to medical consultation. If you're a business person, you do it according to corporate, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the same thing goes with discourse. There is a way to say, okay, this hot button issue going on in the world. Okay, I don't mean to push any buttons, but let's just take the situation between the whole Gaza, Palestinian, Israel, Zionism, Jew thing, okay? When everything started in the past year and a half with the uptick of violence and all of the activism that's going on, I tried to engage in a certain kind of conversation, and I ended up not being able to because nobody in the world, including Baha'is, wanted to have an intelligent conversation about it. And so I made myself, which I always do, I made a grid to basically isolate various layers of the problem and therefore identify the number of factors. I came up with 71 different factors at play that I know about, that are at play in the whole problem over in that part of the world. Each of those factors deserves to be looked at by itself and responded to on its own and not lumped together with all the other 70. And if we did that, I have a feeling that about 1/3 of the responses will piss off everyone who's pro-Palestinian. Another 1/3 will piss off everyone who's pro-Israel. And another 1/3 is going to piss off everybody. Because justice for each factor has to be looked at, not let's lump it all together and either be pro this or pro that. Like that, they've tried that for decades. This is really no different. And until that happens, like, now that's a complicated conversation. It's not impossible. A well-moderated discussion can actually moderate that by saying, let's first throw up on the blackboard or the whiteboard or whatever we're using all of the factors. We're not going to talk, no soapboxes. Let's just identify all the factors. And then, like having an agenda, we're going to talk about one factor at a time. And if so-and-so brings up, well, I want a lot, and then I say, I'm sorry, that's another factor. We're not lumping it in. We're not the U.S. Congress. We're not going to try to piggyback one issue on the resolution of the issue at hand, which is what they do all the time. I'm not going to vote for this bill unless you give me $20 million to buy all the hot dogs in Kentucky. Like, it's that kind of stupid thinking that the world needs to outgrow. And honestly, in my opinion, the Baha'is really ought to be leading the way on having that kind of discourse by actually having that kind of discourse. But I think because there's a misunderstanding about talking about politics and what it does and does not mean, and not really knowing how to talk about things, we just don't know what to do with it. I mean, I'm always very root cause analysis. I'm sure there are a lot of other factors, but to me, those are the big ones. And they're both based on a basic misunderstanding of what I would call religious distortion. And a lot of people are suffering serious mental health because of the stress of world events, politics in their own countries, because we don't know how to process it in a different way than the way the world does it.
Thank you. Fantastic answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Peter, come back next week. You see what kind of speakers we have?
Yeah,
Go
just
ahead.
because I get into trouble all the time in England doesn't mean I'm necessarily going to get into trouble in Toronto.
Okay, perfect. Shailaja, go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you so much. Truly enjoyed your presentation.
Thank you.
I think the reason we have problems with life is our expectations. We think life is a straight line, but we discovered there's a zigzag. There are days that are fabulous, and then there are days that are not that fabulous.
Yes.
So we end up looking at life also through our culture, our experiences, and so forth. I think the problem I have is that we tend to live more in the downhill ones than uphill ones. And sometimes we spend years just kind of enjoying that, soaking in whatever happened 200 years ago to me when I was a child and my mother didn't let me do this. And I think one of the reasons that I find we I don't know, this is me, so please don't misunderstand me. I have said this before and I've got into trouble, but I think we look at death or difficult things in life as something that God has enforced on us. We don't realize that these things are the pattern of life. We are born with a soul and a body and an intellect, as you said. we develop it in this world. We leave some of those stuff here and then take some of the other stuff to the next. And I don't know what we do with it in the next one, and so on. But I think when we get together as older people, which we often do, we tend to be just seeing the negative. And recently, of course, we are talking about all the wars, all the things that are dragging us down, the inflation, the cost of taxes, and so forth. We forget that anything we do is 70% hard work and 30% enjoyment. Yanni, can you do that later? Yanni, would you mind? Thank you. So I have someone here with me who's washing dishes. So what I find, one thing that I find helps me is the fire tablet. And Baha'u'llah wrote the fire tablet in 1871 to the Persians in their questions about why they were going through so much pain. And what I love about it is what you mentioned about some of the writings of Baha'u'llah. He moans about the pains of the life. And then he turns to God and said, why? And then it's as if he's having a conversation with God. He says something, and then he complains to God, and then God responds.
Yes.
And I love this tablet. It helps me personally deal with ups and downs of life. Would you recommend this to everybody, or do you think this would be a difficult tablet to cope with?
I wouldn't recommend it to everybody. I think it really depends on the temperament of the person and the nature of the hardships that they're going through. It's kind of like, everything has its season, and there may be a time or circumstance where something like that is the only solution that will help them. And there are other times where it just might not be on the wavelength that they're operating on. And of course, it depends on what your frame of reference is. Like knowing the context within which the tablet was written helps to understand, sort of the messaging that is part of the tablet. But I do think from what you said at the beginning, which is that yes, sometimes we do often slip into this reflex of being stuck in the complaining, and we all have that tendency, and we can encourage each other to do two things. The first thing we can encourage each other to do is to identify things that are worth being glad about. And it's hard to do that when the news only reports the bad stuff. There are now news websites that report only good news. So like we can start filling our lives with all of the things that are happening in the world that are part of the rebuilding of civilization as the old world comes apart. So that is one thing we can definitely encourage each other to do. The other thing we can encourage each other to do is to take the things that are negative and talk about them in a different way. Not just stop talking about them, but talk about them in a different way. And I could probably pull it up. It's in Secret of Divine Civilization by Abdu'l-Baha. And he ties individual happiness with, quote, the ability to solve difficult problems. So looking at problems is part of being happy. And maybe happiness is not an emotional like I need to be elated 24/7 in order to be happy. Maybe happiness is actually the ability to solve problems. And so it's as much the ability to look at the negative stuff, understand it, and then decide what can we do to solve its impact in our life. And then if we can't do anything about it, then it becomes a question of letting go. But maybe people are stuck because we don't get enough practice actually diving into the negative. We sort of look on the outside and look at it like a show rather than jump in, be part of the negative and solve it. Like, so it really depends from one situation to the next.
Well, I was one of those who,
I'm sorry, I just wanted to say it's 5 to 9.
I'm so
Of
sorry.
course,
Not
I
the
would
turn.
be sitting
Thank
here
you. Thank
till morning, should there be any more questions. But Shahlujun, may I have Ms. Tarane Mohajer ask her question? And there are questions in the chat. So if Dr. Etemad, if you want to be here till morning, you're more than welcome. I'm sorry, Shahlujun, I apologize. Tarane Mohajer, go ahead,
Yes.
please, Tarane Jun.
Sure, Kamjan, Allah
Hi, Tarane
Hafiz,
Ji.
Hi. Thank you. I enjoyed your talk so much, so I have to listen again to the tape to be able to get all the aspect of it. Question I have, we talk about the connection between spirituality and mental health. I want to know what's your idea in children. I was thinking, with children, we have seen sometimes, to me, brain is an organ like any other. So like you have your thyroid gland is not working, so you have to replace the hormone. And also with like a kid with the OCD,
Yes.
it's chemical imbalance.
Yes.
So now effect of connection between spirituality and mental health. How does it start? Is it having an effect? How does it start in the kids? Or is the effect of environment that is making it the way it is? So that was my question. I don't know if it's related or not. I'm just want to pick your brain because I'm interested to see what you think.
The same construct sort of applies, but I do think that with children, because they are in active development, as of course you know better than I do. But body and brain are undergoing so many developmental crises and milestones all the time, that there is all this vulnerability that happens during development for development to be disrupted, whether it's biological development or psychological development or neurological or sexual or all the different levels of a person. They're all vulnerable during development. So children are definitely much more vulnerable. And certainly all of the lack of spirituality or the lack of existential respect of a child, which is the basic thing, just being respected as a human being. It sounds corny, but the lack of that can be very damaging psychologically. Certainly, if there are cognitive distortions, misinformation, lies, religious distortion, they all can affect. Certainly, definitely there is a great vulnerability. That being said, there is a certain amount of brain-based mental illness that the meta-analysis of the psychiatric literature seems to indicate that there is an actual increase in the incidence of brain impact going on in the world, manifesting in children. Whether you're talking about ADHD or autism spectrum or depression or mood disorders or whatever it might be. Now, all things, So it's not simply because, oh, doctors are more tuned into picking up the signs and symptoms. It's because there seems to be an actual increase. And boom, 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 boom. If you do some meta analysis, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I do think it's because there is stuff in the environment, particularly in food. There are unknown impacts of medications and our water and our air, but especially the food industry that like impacts and is, the epigenetics. Like, I wish Sheila Dean were here because she talks about epigenetics and micronutrients, and she would be able to give the details. But there are lots of things that can turn on and off genes. It's no longer just a question of genetics. It's about what are the lifestyle and environmental and dietary factors that can turn genes on and off, that can prevent, cause, start, stop things that become chronic illness or contribute to acute illness or whatever. So I think that when a child is struggling with mental health symptoms, certainly they all need to be looked at. The existential questions, definitely in child psychiatry. A child psychiatrist who treats a child is really treating the family system, because at least 50+% of the problems or the patients are in fact simply a conduit of dynamics and pathologies in the family system. So that needs to be looked at, which impacts the existential health of a child. Definitely, are they getting stimulated in terms of intellectual, emotional, creative, tactile, social, definitely looking, of course, doing the standard psychiatric assessment. But on top of that, there really needs to be a broader assessment of two things: the physical environment, and whether it's food, or the things that I mentioned, but also children pick up on the vibe of society. Like, my daughter is a generation that has grown up with more angst about society than even those who grew up under nuclear threat. It's a bigger angst now. There's a great increase in the incidence of something called death by despair, which is, suicide, accidental overdose, and liver disease somehow associated with alcohol. And they are all tied to despair about the societal breakdown that's going on. So these things are going to manifest themselves in these little vessels, these children. And of course, we've got to do our standard assessment and care, but we also need to recognize that there are bigger things at play. So within that context, anything that will empower a child to trust their own, even if it's undeveloped, their own intuition. And of course, a 3-month-old doesn't have that facility yet, but a 3-year-old certainly does. And how often are 3-year-olds dismissed? So empowering is got to be part of parenting on a level that it wasn't before. But you got to empower without making them narcissists. So it's not an easy thing to do. And I think that's where spirituality would take place, because I don't know if just saying prayers with your kids or something like that necessarily means anything for a child, except maybe the sound of a chanted voice, because it vibrates in the bones of the child. So it's such a complicated issue, and I'm so glad you brought it up, because it really is the litmus test of how well are we doing as a culture, is the mental health of our children, and especially of our young children. So I don't even really know if I answered your question, or I just made your question like more multifactorial, like that my own head's going to explode.
No, it was very helpful. Another thing, how the child is going to start the spiritual part of it. understanding that. That was also interesting for me. That it's definitely environment, that's definitely parents. But when they are going to get to the point that the concept of spirituality is for them, because the children, even we don't think they understand it or noticing it, they get it. Maybe they cannot verbalize it, but you
Yeah.
see it's there.
I work with this assumption when I think about or interacting with anybody. When I interact with you, I'm interacting with your body, mind, and soul. So, like how I appear, how I sound will affect one level. What I say and how I say it will affect mentally. But I also need to see you as the soul. And what does that mean? What I mean is that part of you that appreciates beauty, that part of you that is creative, that can make something out of nothing or turn something old into something new. So that imagination, that part of you that loves, and that part of you that is noble. So with a child, at least what I think we kind of try to do with Elise, and what I would sort of say would be the construct. We made plenty of mistakes with Elise, and she's doing a very articulate job of pointing out what they are. But I would say when a child displays anything that looks like a noble idea or feeling, wanting to help someone, mostly wanting to be help of someone or compassion to suffering in the world, grab onto it gently. Like if I'm too intent about it, I'm going to freak the child out. But basically mean give attention to it. Like I noticed that, you were, wanting to do something for auntie so-and-so or uncle so-and-so or your friend, and foster that. Like, what would you like to do for your friend at school? And then have a conversation. Or if they're too young to think about it, give them a suggestion. The same thing goes for anything that has to do with their creativity. If they have something creative or imaginative, I would encourage it and never suppress it. Ever, ever, ever. Like, my daughter, Elise went, she one time went into, was actually on her way to Baha'i school. And she was talking about, Harry Potter, and she loved Hogwarts and everything that it was. And the driver who was driving all the kids to Sunday school that day was sort of like, well, Harry Potter's not real. And my answer to that is, you don't say that to an 8-year-old kid. Like, first of all, Elise always wanted to know the difference between real and pretend. And even at 9 years old, she would have been able to say, yes, I know it's not real. It's a metaphor for bigger ideas. Like, Elise would have been able to say that. But the point is that when we say things like that, it discourages that creativity and that imagination. But if we encourage creativity and imagination in every possible way, well, that's part of the soul. That's coming from the soul. The same thing goes with beauty. Exposing them to as many things that they might consider beautiful. Might not be our idea of beauty, but the more the merrier. Going out on outings and seeing things and doing things and listening to different music and whatever it might be. And, I might think that, Beethoven's Piano Sonata is beautiful. And she might be like, no, AC/DC is beautiful. Like, and she'll tell me that. And I think that we just need to encourage their feelings that are soulful at that early age, because relating to God, the abstract, is hard enough for an adult. Why put that on a kid? Why could put that on a kid? Maybe prayer for them is about the beauty of that tree or those clouds, and just say that's beauty. You don't even have to say that's God, because at some point they'll make the connection. That's what I feel in terms of translating spiritual experience into child psychological terms.
Thank you, Dr. Etemad. It's really the way you said it, it makes sense. So I appreciate it.
Nice to talk with you, Tarajun.
Thank you so much, Dr. Etemad. All of this shows us that we need to ask you to come back very soon because there are a lot of questions. And so it's 9:10. We usually at 8:30 we start our devotionals, but we are very, very honored that you stay and you stayed so long and answered all the questions. If the friends would like to start our devotionals, please make a prayer ready. Dr. Etemad, as always, thank you so very much for everything. And I think in order to be the speaker of a fireside, it takes certain serenity and bravery, and you have both of them. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you for creating an environment where this kind of conversation can happen. It definitely feeds my heart, and I'm very grateful for any opportunity to be part of it or to contribute to it. And the only quality it requires is a little bit of insanity.
Well, the friends create the space themselves, and I am always grateful that they are so loyal and so wonderful and always come with a smile, with a certain level of kindness and support. Thank you to all. Queen Bridget, you didn't say anything, but that's okay. Another time we'll see you or Grace and others. Phil, thank you so much for attending. Phil has one of the most distinguished sons in the world, and we served together in Haifa. Please give my love to him. Thank you, thank you. Friends, if you would like to stay behind, please, we're going to have our devotions anyways. Thank you so much, Mr. Perimal, that you're here. Mr. Liu, you will start again. Jalal, did you go? No, Jalal, just a smile. A prayer, please. Pina, love you. Pina, Malaysia, thank you so much, appreciated. They are all writing beautiful things for you. Kambeze John, please look at the chat. I appreciate it. So, could I ask probably, Mr. Leo, would you like to start the prayer, please? And I know that there was another question from Montgomery family. I will promise, it was a long question, and I will promise that I will have Dr. Etemad come back. And
We can have a session that is only question, answer, and discussion.
Perfect.
And no presentation. This could be a part 2 where if people want to watch the video of this presentation beforehand, we just won't have a presentation next time.
You see, solving the hard problems, exactly what Abdul Baha said. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Mr. Liuchi, please start. And we miss Juliet very much. Go ahead, please. Mr. Liuchi, it seems that your internet is not working very well. I apologize, but I think, Mr. Liucci, we can't. Yeah, the internet is very shaky. I apologize. Why don't I ask Mr. Perimal to say a prayer, and then again, let's see if your internet will settle down. Mr. Perimal, thank you for being here tonight. What time is it there?
It's 12 midday.
Midday. Perfect. Thank you. From Australia, Mr. Perimal. Go ahead.
Let's pray. O thou divine providence, preserve and protect us. O thou who art our shield, save us and defend us. Keep us beneath thy shelter, and by thy help save us from all ills. Thou art indeed the true protector, the unseen guardian, the celestial preserver, and the heavenly loving Lord. Abdul Wahab.
Jella?
I beg thy forgiveness, O my God, and implore pardon after the manner thou wished thy servants to direct themselves to thee. I beg of thee to wash away our sins as befitteth thy lordship, and to forgive me, my parents, and those who in thy estimation have entered the abode of thy love in a manner which is worthy of thy transcendent sovereignty, and well beseemeth the glory of thy celestial power. O my God, thou hast inspired my soul to offer its supplication to thee, and but for thee I would not call upon thee. Lauded and glorified art thou. I yield thee praise inasmuch as thou didst reveal thyself unto me, and I beg thee to forgive me, since I have fallen short in my duty to know thee, and have failed to walk in the path of thy love.
Tina?
Rely upon God, trust in Him, praise Him and call Him continually to mind. He verily turneth trouble into ease, and sorrow into solace, and toil into utter peace. He verily hath dominion over all things. He verily hath dominion over all things. Granted it yours, con fuel and ill. Alabade el cordale continuamente. El en verdad trucalacal de fedodal en terquele de la edad e la descarcacia un consuelo e el trovado all complete paz. Abdul Baha.
Friends, anyone else would like to say a prayer to close tonight? By the way, Didi, it was wonderful to see you. You have such a beautiful face. I've been looking at your face all along. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Hi,
Genga, thank you.
Diana.
Yes, go ahead, please, please.
No, I just want to say hi to Diana. That's Dee Dee.
Okay. Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to say a prayer. If
Please go
you,
ahead.
oh, sorry, Peter
Yes.
Baldwin has put up his hand. I can wait, no problem.
You will say a prayer, Mr. Genga, and then Peter will be after you.
Okay,
How
thank you.
about that?
That's fine, thank you.
Thank you.
O thou compassionate Lord, thou who art generous and able, we are servants of thine sheltered beneath thy providence. Cast thou glance of favor upon us. Give light to our ears, hearing to our give light to our eyes, and hearing to our ears, and understanding and love to our hearts. Render our souls joyous and happy through thy glad tidings. O Lord, point out to us the pathway of thy kingdom, and resuscitate all of us through the breaths of the Holy Spirit. Bestow upon us life everlasting, and confer upon us never-ending honor. Unify mankind and illumine the world of humanity. May we all follow thy pathway, long for thy good pleasure, and seek the mysteries of thy kingdom. O God, unite us and connect our hearts with thy indissoluble bond. Verily, thou art the giver, thou art the kind one, and thou art the Almighty. Abdul Baha.
Go ahead, Peter. Thank you, Mr. Ganga.
The hearts that yearn after thee, O my God, are burnt up with the fire of their longing for thee. And the eyes of them that love thee weep sore by reason of their crushing separation from thy court. And the voice of the lamentation of such as have set their hopes on thee hath gone forth throughout thy dominions. Thou hast thyself, O my God, protected them by thy sovereign might from both extremities. But for the burning of their souls and the sighing of their hearts, they would be drowned in the midst of their tears. And but for the flood of their tears, they would be burnt up by the fire of their hearts and the heat of their souls. Methinks they are like the angels which thou hast created, of snow and of fire. Wilt thou, despite such vehement longing, O my God, debar them from thy presence, or drive them away, notwithstanding such fervour, from the door of thy mercy? All hope is ready to be extinguished in the hearts of thy chosen ones, O my God. Where are the breezes of thy grace? They are hemmed in on all sides by their enemies. Where are the ensigns of thy triumph, which thou didst promise in thy tablets? Thy glory is my witness. At each daybreak, they who love thee wake to find the cup of woe set before their faces, because they have believed in thee and acknowledged thy signs. Though I firmly believe that thou hast a greater compassion on them than they have on their own selves, though I recognize that thou hast afflicted them for no other purpose except to proclaim thy cause, and to enable them to ascend into the heaven of thine eternity and the precincts of thy court, yet thou knowest full well the frailty of some of them, and art aware of their impatience in their sufferings. Help them through thy strengthening grace, I beseech thee, O my God, to suffer patiently in their love for thee, and unveil to their eyes what thou hast decreed for them behind the tabernacle of thine unfailing protection, so that they may rush forward to meet what is preordained for them in thy path, and may vie in hasting after tribulation in their love towards thee. And if not, do thou then reveal the standards of thine ascendancy, and make them to be victorious over thine adversaries, that thy sovereignty may be manifested unto all the dwellers of thy realm, and the power of thy might demonstrated amidst thy creatures. Powerful art thou to do what thou willest. No God is there but thee, the omniscient, the all-wise. Make steadfast thou, O my God, thy servant, who hath believed in thee to help thy cause, to keep him safe from all dangers in the stronghold of thy care and thy protection, both in this life and in the life which is to come. Thou verily rulest as thou pleasest. No God is there save no God is there save thee, the ever forgiving, the most generous.
Buruz Khano,
Yes, please.
I want to ask everybody, please keep Iranian people in your prayer.
Thank you.
Iranian people.
Yes, 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 yes. They are in our hearts and in our mind and in our tears. Montgomery family, a prayer, please, no, not a question, but a prayer.
Yes, a prayer.
Sure, go for it.
My daughter Sarah just coming real quick. My God, my adored one, my King, my desire. What tongue can voice my thanks? Voice my thanks to thee, my God, my adored one, my King, my desire. What tongue can voice my thanks? Voice my thanks to thee.
We have the most gorgeous young son of Didi here. Does he want to say a prayer to close tonight?
Would that be okay?
It would be perfect.
Allahu yakfi an kale shayem. Oh, Allahu yakfi an kale shayem. Esa yatavakela mutevakelu mutevakela mutevakelu. God is sufficient unto me. He is the all-sufficing. God is sufficient unto me. He is the all-sufficing. Let the trusting trust Him. Let the trusting trust. Let the trusting trust. Let the trusting trust. Let the trusting trust.
May I ask what your name is by any chance?
Nabil,
Nabil, it was beautiful. I hope you can come back every Thursday and say a prayer for us. Would that be possible? Ask your mom. You both said a prayer in Arabic and English together. That was beautiful, sweetheart.
thank you. Have a nice evening.
Thank you. We'll see him next week, even if you can't make it. Thank you, everyone. Farga, thank you so much. You'll be in our list. Mr. Perimal, thank you for joining us. Kay, thank you, thank you, thank you. Montgomery family, thank you. Malijun, thank you. Regina, love, love, love you. Peter, come back next week. Tarani Jun, thanks for all your comments. Shahla Jun, forgive me for the rest of my life. Sorry. Phil, love to have you here every week. Pina, you're in our prayers, but you're feeling much better. Giti Jun, fantastic son you raised. Wow. What you did. Wow. Kamran John, thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Leslie, Joanne, Mr. Ginga, HP, the Faye John, I'm so glad you're here. Mr. Ginga, are you well? Is everything okay?
I'm very fine, thank you. Only
Okay,
some health issues on my wife and my daughter.
I'm
My
sorry.
daughter had it's okay. My daughter had a breast cancer. She's recovered now. Yes, and my wife has a heart condition. She's going to hospital every now and then.
I'm so sorry to hear
No
that.
problem. Thank you.
Much love. I think Faye, you started your something going on here. Anyways, Mr. Ganga, what's the name of your daughter?
Her name is Ramana Kanum.
Ramana Kanu. She will
Yeah,
be in our prayers. Thank
thank
you
you.
so much. Thank you. Love you all. Kambeze John, love you all. And I'll be in touch with you so you can come back just to answer all the questions.
Sounds great. Thank you again. As always, such a wonderful atmosphere you create.
And you all created it. I didn't do a thing. Leslie, thank you. Frank, Wilf, Simi Khanum, Faye, you opened the sky to us. Faye and I served in Haifa together. Probably this is the sky from Haifa. Jalal, chara mikhandi. Thank you, everyone. Love you. See you next Thursday.
Take
Much
care.
love.
Thank you kindly. Thank you so much. With
Thank
much love from us as well. Thank you.
thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Kambeze John, خیلی دوست دارم. Thank
Love
you.
you too. Take care.
Love you. Bye.
Bye.
چه ناطق عالی.
I didn't get that. نفهمیدم کی بود. Anyways, thank you so much. Good night.
Good night.